Hi, my name is Terri Horwich of Personal Affairs Management. I work with seniors in helping them organize their life in lots of different ways. Today, I want to start talking about paperwork because I find this gets increasingly challenging as people get older for a variety of reasons. People often are challenged by having papers all over the place or too many papers. So I want to talk about that and see if I can help. Okay, the first principle I want to give you is that people lose things precisely because they're afraid of losing things. What do I mean by that? Well, um, let's say that you're afraid that you're going to lose a piece of paper. It's really important. You are going to the doctor and you have some notes that you've made, or there's a medication list that you're concerned about, and you know you're going to see the doctor in a couple of days. So, of course, you take that and you put that right up front on your desk because you just don't want to put it away and not know where it is, right? And then there's something you receive by email that you print out that's notes for your that shows when your next book club is or your movie club or whatever. And you're not sure when that is. You got to put in the calendar. You haven't done that yet, so you put that on the desk too. Maybe the same thing with tax forms if it's tax season, because those are official documents. You put a paper clip on them and you put those to the side too. Possible travel dates, stuff to ask your kids. Typically, things that are really important that you're really concerned about are the things that you leave out because you're afraid that you won't know where you put it and you don't have a particular place to put it, right? So what happens is you put all of those things on the desk, right? Or let's say you're really afraid of forgetting something. So in each room, you have a little pad or some sticky notes or something, and you're afraid you'll forget something. So if there's a phone call or when you remember it, you make a note, which is very efficient, understandable. But then what happens is often you have a list in every room, or you have a couple of different sticky notes, and one you put in your purse, and another one you're not sure where you put, and you remember there's a phone call, a phone number in blue, but you're not exactly sure which sticky note that was on. And so you forget which room it was in, you can't find it easily, just like with the papers, and then you wind up recopying the lists. So the concept is when you're really afraid that you're going to lose a paper, you tend to put it out, leave it out, and then when you are afraid that you're going to forget a note or something, then you put that all over the place too. So the more worried you are, in my view, about forgetting things, the more things wind up all over the place. I've worked with a number of seniors where they say when I first walk into their house, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe it. I've got papers everywhere. I used to be so organized. I don't understand why this is happening. And we find out that, they've been trying to put the greeting cards separately over by the phone so that they'll remember that they've got to return the cards, write a thank you note or something. And then perhaps there's doctor visit summaries, and it's so important because you're going in the next few days. Then instead of putting that on the desk, you put that in your calendar, but you don't carry your calendar in the purse all the time. So you, again, shuffle through and have to look them. So obviously this creates a lot of anxiety and it wastes a lot of time. And I find that seniors wind up worrying a lot, not only about where something is, but why they can't remember in general. The solution is to have one specific place for each paper that you have, and only one place that paper can go. Let me tell you about that more specifically. People can have all sorts of different filing systems. And when I say filing systems, they don't necessarily have to look like a traditional office filing system. My preference is to have a little rolling cart that can go under your table or desk or wherever you like to work. And it has individual labeled files, not more than about 10 or 15, just the stuff that you work with on a day-to-day basis that you frequently are going to need and you don't want to forget. And if you get that filing system down, you're going to feel so confident it's going to be right there. Everything is going to be like it was on your desk, but it's going to be in a place that you can find it. But for whatever reason, if you don't like that or you don't have room, sometimes I've worked with somebody that is so nervous that they won't find something that they do want it on their desk, but they want to separate stuff out. So you can use a vertical sort of filing organizer that sits on your desk, and at least the most important things go in there. I find that tends to pile up just like the desk does, but some people like it. I have some clients who wind up with essentially a dresser drawer that used to be something else, or a desk drawer, but they know that the top desk drawer has the cards and notes that they want to return. The second one has all the bills and the money. The third one has the tech stuff and the computer stuff. Whatever way you do it, the important thing is that it be something, again, where you understand it, you're very familiar with it eventually once you set it up, and there's only one place that something can go. A lot of people like using color. So I, for example, with my little rolling cart, I always have all of the medical stuff in blue. I have green stuff is money, and it sort of visually helps me go right to that section. And then within that, I have individual files for bills or credit cards or whatever else. Again, if you're really nervous about about putting stuff away, or you just don't have time, Container Store and other places online sell really these sort of giant clips that look like food bag clips, but they say urgent or file or important or whatever. You can get whatever you want, or you can label them yourself, but they're big clips and they're very easy to use. And if nothing else, you can at least make those files on the desk as you're working, so you're not as worried about the stuff in filing, and you have a general idea where to look for something important. The really important thing about this is that you be deliberate, and you take this kind of like an assignment, and you really sit and think and make a list of what are the things that you need on a day-to-day basis, whether it's urgent stuff or notes for appointments or phone lists or anything, right? That or something that's like a book club where you might only pull it out once a month, or something like bills and credit cards where you're probably not going to look at the past ones, but let's say there's a question about whether you paid it, or a charge was that on last month, you know right where to get it. So, for example, I keep talking about doctor visits because I find people tend to go to the doctor a lot more as they get older. But let's say you've got an after visit summary and you want to keep the last one. Where do you put that? Most people get filing systems screwed up because they don't make a definite, specific decision about where stuff like that goes, right? So an after visit summary could go in medical, it could go in appointments, it might go in to-do, it might go in a number of different things, right? Or a Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance bill, the premium. Does that go with insurance, or does that go with medical insurance, or does that go with bills? It doesn't matter how you do it. It's a matter of thinking, how do I think about this? Do I think of this in terms of subjects? Yeah, medical. I want everything that's medical has to be there. And as long as I have a little file that says notes or, see the doctor or whatever, I'm comfortable. It doesn't matter whether you set up a lot of different files or a small amount of files where you kind of throw everything that you may never need again, like, excuse me, credit card bills or bank statements. It's in that big file over there. And if you need it, you sort through it then. You don't have to organize it by date or whatever. Think about what is easy for you. I find for most people, about 12, 15 files are good for organizing your daily life, right? We're not talking about past records or anything. We're talking about a limited number of bills and credit cards and bank statements, investment statements, things like that for money, insurance correspondence and premiums, medical, as we talked about, either after visit summaries, some recent medical records, and so on. If you have too many files, you start getting into 25, 30 files, and they're all very specific, that can be confusing too, because now you're spending a lot of time looking through files. My personal recommendation is you have a hanging folder that goes on that fits into the file cabinet, and they also make expandable ones if you need it, if you've got a lot of stuff in medical, for example, and make that blue or whatever you want, and put it in the file drawer, and then subdivide it with just file folders rather than that sit in the hanging folder. So again, medical would include insurance premiums, doctor visits, recent medical, and whatever else, medication lists, whatever else you need. But again, there's no right way or wrong way to do it, but sit down and actually make a deliberate decision about it. I do recommend that you avoid sort of generic topic related files. I used to do these and I found that it got me in trouble because I didn't know where things were. So something like to do important, or pending soon, or vital, or whatever. Sometimes you don't look at it for a while and something that was vital isn't vital anymore. It's hard to remember necessarily where you put something, excuse me, if it's labeled in a way that doesn't tell you exactly what it is. A lot of people like to do it alphabetically. So they've got medical is under M. That's also okay if that's the way you do it, but it also can be confusing because that doesn't by itself tell you, do I look in M for medical, or do I look in I for insurance? It is a way of organizing. If you're used to it or you love it, that's fine. But in general, I find that now you have two places that something can be. And the minute you have two places to look, you're going to get anxious. You may not be able to find something, and the thing is going to wind up on the desk again sometimes. Once you create a system, you just have to try it. People are really, really nervous when they set something up and they see it right there and they were aware of it, but now what if I lose something? It's a really, really big concern that you're not going to be able to put your fingers on something that you need. I suggest for people when they're first getting started that they make a pony, sort of like you do with bridge or whatever. And you do it like a cookbook index. So let's say you've got 15 different files, 3 of those are medical and 3 are money and 3 more are personal and so on. In a cookbook, as you know, things are listed in 2 different ways. So you can look up beef stew and you can look that up under beef or under soups and stews and so on. So there are a number of places you can find something, but there's only one page that it appears on. So for example, on one piece of paper, you would list the kinds of things that you're likely to have to file: insurance bill, medical bill, notes for movie group or book group, and so on. And next to that, you put which file that's going to be in. What did you decide about what that file is called? So that at any time when you think, oh, where do the movie group things go? You can look at that. There's a list of them and you'll see movie group. Okay, that goes in lists or groups or entertainment or whatever you want to call it. And then you can do a reverse pony too. You can have a second page that says medical, money, etc., and it lists the subfolders under that so that you'll know exactly how that stuff is organized. If you take a file out, you know where to put it and where to look. If you have those 2 things, then it's almost impossible that you won't be able to figure out where something is, because you'll either say, go to the general sort of chapter headings, oh, medical, okay, that's blue, that's whatever. Or you can go to a specific thing saying medication list, and you can check and see that that's in medical important, or how I said avoid important, but whatever it is that you're calling that particular file. You've got a list to go to that you can keep on your desk and that may be reassuring. I find that really the key is just use it. If you make yourself use it every day, like taking medicine or anything else, and I don't mean to be condescending, but where people go wrong again is what I said at the beginning. They're worried that this is not going to work. And so as a result, they just kind of don't use it, or they wait for the next time that I'm going to come over to remind them. If you use it yourself, you're going to learn very quickly where stuff is, and you're going to feel confident about that. Some silly hints: always use labels. And that seems really silly, but for whatever reason, sometimes people, I find, keep old manila folders that used to be real estate or something, and it's written in pencil, and they don't want to throw the folder out. So they erase that and put something in pen, and now it's actually credit card bills. And it's kind of hard to read, and they're a little bit frayed. And even if you have a great system, it's not easy to figure out quickly where that particular file is. Invest in a box of files, a box of hanging folders, and a box of interior file folders. They make some that have extra big tabs, and I recommend using extra big labels. There are some that are erasable, which I love, because then as you're getting used to using a new system, if you're not going to feel hysterical if you did something wrong. You use a Sharpie, and then they give you an eraser. You just erase the thing and put something else down. And then it's also more frugal because you don't constantly have to start new ones when you need them. I'm not going to go into much detail today about objects and other ways of organizing other than paperwork, but I will say similar systems can be used for your keys, for objects, for lists, passwords, and that sort of thing. If you have a list that tells you, I always keep the keys here, sometimes maybe you put it in the wrong place, but at least you know where to go and get it. And most people know where their keys are, but sometimes there are documents that they put in their purse, or maybe it's in the calendar, or maybe it's on the desk calendar or whatever. It can be helpful to just write down and remind yourself, where is it supposed to be? Okay, the second big thing I want to talk about in terms of how you can streamline your paperwork and feel more confident, and also sometimes if you're downsizing or it's just overwhelming that you have 17 boxes of papers in the basement or in a closet and so on. I will tell you, I will guarantee you, absolutely, whatever you have too much. You have way too much paperwork that you've been keeping and accumulating over the years. And even if you tried streamlining, you haven't quite been sure how to do that. We were trained to keep paper, right? And not only paper, I've worked with clients who have 3 and 4 copies of important things like a will or a mortgage. They wanted to make absolutely sure that they made copies at the time, because what if they have to send it out to a lawyer? What if they need it for something? What if they lose one copy, right? That has really changed. We don't need to keep that much paper anymore. Even if you don't go online and that's not how you find your paper, if you don't go online to see your bank statement or your credit card bill, you have a paper statement come to you, that's fine. But somebody is keeping that. Your credit card company can make it available to you. They know where all of those statements are, probably for at least the last 2 years and sometimes much longer. Same for the bank. So for a lot of entities, they are keeping the records for you. You don't need to go that far back, and you don't need to have that many copies, because if you really need it and you don't have it, you can get it, right? And you don't have to get it by going on the computer. You can get it by simply calling your bank or your credit card company and saying, can you send me copies? And almost all the time, they will. A pet peeve of mine is when you just file sort of all the paper that comes to you in correspondence or letters. For example, you get the Blue Cross Blue Shield explanation of benefits. At the back of that is a sheet that says, if you want to appeal, this is how you do it, right? That's a really nice sheet, but you just need one copy of it. When you take the stuff out of the envelope and you want to file that explanation of benefits, get rid of the third sheet. You would be amazed how much room that will save you over time. Same thing with important documents from the government or so on, and they have a sheet or two at the back of everything that they're sending you that has the translation in 25 languages, including Sanskrit. You'll never need that. Get rid of it before you file it. The same thing is actually really helpful when it comes to guides, like you buy a new dishwasher and you get a manual. Almost all the time now, if it's a 60-page manual, 30 pages of that is the Spanish version. You don't need that. Open it up, staple the part that you need, throw away the rest, and you'll find that your paperwork will take up much less room over time. Because of the factors I've been talking about, We also have paperwork that goes back way too long that we just are not going to have any need for. And we're keeping it because we're nervous. What if I need it? But you don't. So, for example, it used to be that the accountant's excuse me, recommendation was to keep tax returns for 7 to 10 years, some longer if it was particularly complicated, keep your backup, all your donation and charity receipts, and that sort of thing. Well, nowadays, my clients' accountants are telling them, no, really 3 to 5 years is more than enough. And by the way, I have a copy going back now, 8, 10 years of the digital tax returns we filed. So you really are not going to need a paper copy of a tax return or the backup for more than, let's say, 5 years. Same thing is true with older utility bills, bank statements. I see clients who have years of bank statements and credit card statements and maybe 2 years of the ComEd bill and other utility bills. You just don't need it. You need, and it depends on what you're comfortable with. Some people keep 2 or 3 months of credit card statements or bank statements once they kind of redo their system, because the only reason you're really going to need it is, or they will need it, is if they don't remember whether a particular charge was charged last month or this month. So a couple of months back is really enough for them. And if for whatever reason they need something further back, they can ask the credit card company. Most of the time, for most people, I think keeping the current year, so if it's in June, you've got from December to June, and 1 year back is usually helpful. Credit card statements can be used for tax purposes and all sorts of other things at the end of the year. So it doesn't hurt you to keep last year, and this year at most you'll have 24 clumps of paper. When in doubt, obviously, don't take my word for how long you should keep taxes, depending on your individual situation. Ask your accountant. Same thing with wills or old condo documents or whatever. The professionals are going to tell you what they think is relevant, and that's important. But I guarantee you have too many years going back and too many things. You don't need 3 condos back, etc. Obviously, having too much paperwork takes up physical space, and a lot of times, especially if people have downsized or they're trying to make their apartment more accessible and so on, you're really losing a lot of closet space with the boxes in there, or storage space and so on. But in addition, there really is a downside for keeping multiple copies and multiple years of important documents. It really can cause confusion at pretty critical times. So, for example, I've seen people who keep the copy of their current will and their current power of attorney for healthcare, and they have that in a maybe in a big red folder, or maybe just sort of at the back of the files, and they've got maybe 2 or 3 copies of that, the signed copy and maybe another signed copy or witnessed, and then they have the one that they did before that they changed from, the one that they did in 2016. And a couple of copies of that. Maybe they have the power of attorneys going back 3 or 4 iterations, or you have powers of attorney for healthcare that go back quite a ways. And over time, you've changed your view on a couple of things. So things may be different, or the person that is going to be your executor has changed. It can really cause confusion, because even though one is dated more recently, sometimes you set up trusts in a previous one and you look and you're not sure, or your heirs will look and they're not sure, does that trust still exist? The newest will doesn't refer to it, or the old will said there was stuff in a safety deposit box. Does that still exist? It's not referenced in the new will. Do I just use the new will, or should I do some investigating and so on? It's really important when it comes to powers of attorney for healthcare and for property. Sometimes powers of attorney for healthcare need to be used pretty quick. If you get very seriously ill, for example, or you're temporarily not able to make a decision, the person that you have appointed to take care of your healthcare for you, let's say your son, is going to need to make those decisions for you. Sometimes they haven't seen the power of attorney for healthcare, which I think is a mistake. I think that your son or whoever you've appointed should always have a copy of that, and so should the doctor and the hospital and so on. But in case of a decision where somebody needs to help you decide what it is, or help you or for you decide what should happen to you in terms of healthcare, they're going to need to produce that document pretty quickly in some cases, and or brothers are going to have to know which one of those people actually gets the right to decide for you what should be done. If you have multiple copies tossed in that drawer, going back several times, maybe different, maybe the same, it can really cause confusion or just cost time when something is needed quickly. And again, the more you have, the less likely it is that you'll find it when you really need it. So don't keep copies of things that you don't need. And if you're not sure, keep a moderate amount, but there's certainly stuff that you can go through. It's painful to do that, and I know it causes a lot of anxiety to open those boxes up and decide what to do, and it can be problematic. But whether you do it yourself or you get help, I would say make an appointment with yourself for a couple of days, as if you're taking a vacation, or do it once a week for a couple of hours, but see if you can do a spring or fall or winter cleaning. And I think you'll find that it's really very comforting to get rid of all that stuff. In general, and again, talk to your professionals about exactly what to keep in different areas of legal or financial. But in general, what you should keep copies of are your wills, trusts, powers of attorney for healthcare and for property, any legal documents that are going to have force and effect while you're alive or when you pass away. Recent tax returns, again, 3 to 5 years, ask your accountant about that. Irreplaceable or difficult to replace documents like stock certificates or proof of veteran status, that sort of thing, that would be really difficult to get, keep those. Certainly insurance policies themselves, especially if you have long-term care, life insurance policies, you may or may not be able to get a copy of that easily, but certainly you want to have that easily accessible at home. Again, we talked about credit card and bank statements and other bills. I don't think it's necessary to save 2 years of ComEd bills unless you really want to make a list and figure out what the average is. And nowadays that's often on the bill itself anyway. But, keep some amount of that so you can reference it for tax purposes at the end of the year or the next year if you want to compare the bills and so on. Obviously, deeds and real estate transactions. So if you have a copy of a mortgage, that's fine. Obviously, you need to keep it, and I would keep the application and the whole thing. You probably will never need to look at it until you sell a place, and maybe not even then. But obviously, you want to keep the actual documents. And I also say the same thing about paid loans. You don't really need to keep the loan you paid off for a car that you already sold, but anything that was significant that possibly could be the subject of some dispute in the family or whatever, keep a copy of that stuff. What you should not keep copies of: older, as I said before, powers of attorney, wills, and so on, doctor appointment summaries, and medication lists. And this is one where I find people are really very nervous about keeping only the most recent one, or the most recent one from each doctor, or a couple of them. And I'm not exactly sure why. I think it's because when people see the doctor at one point and make a decision that might be important about a medication change, or they need physical therapy, if that happened in March and now you saw the person in April and the doctor, and now you've got a new summary, you may be nervous that, gee, the last one told me that I should change the medication and I want to make sure to keep it so I remember. If you want to, keep 2 or 3 or 4 back per doctor, but I would not keep anything more than that. And I would make sure, highlight the dates that those are printed out, or the date that you saw the doctor, because again, people can get really confused. I have seen people who keep those by the dining room table, but they've got 10 or 12 or 15 of those doctor visit summaries. Each of them might have a slightly different medication list. Each of them may have slightly different instructions, follow-up appointments, and so on. And while it seems relatively easy to keep the most recent one on top, for whatever reason, if you or a caregiver or a relative have gone through them, or you've just put it on the side table with some other things, it can be easy to confuse those. And I've seen people who make important medication mistakes or other mistakes because they're following an older set of instructions or medications or doctor visit summary. Same thing is true with copies of Medicare and insurance IDs. And again, I don't mean to be condescending, but I do see people with giant fat wallets because they're keeping not only their current Medicare card and their Blue Cross card, but they're keeping the last 3 as well for whatever reason. Takes up space, it weighs you down, and it will only cause confusion. That's something that's replaceable also pretty easily if you lose that card. Same thing for old copies of checks, for closed accounts and so on. You might want that for a year or 2, but you don't need that whole bundle from the last 10 years that you started keeping 10 years ago. There are some booklets or manuals that really take up a lot of space, like, the list of which formularies are covered under your insurance, and it's 200 pages long, and you're never going to look at it. If you are going to look at it, terrific. If you're going to refer to it, keep it. But there are some things like that people just know they're not ever going to use, or the manual for some obscure appliance. The manual, if the appliance breaks, they call their son or they call Apt, and they do that. They're not going to look at the manual themselves. If you're not going to look at it, get rid of it. Same thing is true with old retirements and investment statements. I recommend certainly keeping those for a couple of years, but a lot of times, 2 things. One, you get a lot of information you don't need. You might get a whole proposal or data report from a particular investment fund, mutual fund, and it's full of all sorts of technical lawyerly language that's required to be distributed by the federal government. But 99.9% of the time, there's no reason that you need that. The company that's sending it to you will always have a report. There's nothing in there that you would reference. Feel absolutely free to toss those when you get them. And certainly if you're keeping old reports of what you once had in a particular bank account or investment fund, and it's been closed, or you don't refer to it in any way anymore, get rid of the older ones. And then my favorite, which is if you're keeping something just in case, then you got to think about what kind of in case. Under what circumstances would I both need this and be able to find it? Is it worth the paper it's printed on? Because a lot of people just say, well, I might need something just in case, I'll keep it, it's not a big deal. All of us do that. But take a few minutes, like I said at the beginning, to write down exactly where you put things. Take a few minutes to think about, well, under what circumstances would I possibly use this? Often when I ask people that question, they literally can't think of anything that they would do with it, or they know that it's buried so deep that they're never going to find it when they wanted to look at it anyway. If either of those things are true, there's no point in keeping it. So be realistic with yourself about what you actually will use, or somebody else needs, or what you're not going to need or use. I've talked about older records that you might want to keep, like tax returns for 3 to 5 years, that sort of stuff. What I recommend is, as I said at the beginning, in whatever filing system you're using, put things that you only work with on a daily basis. And when I say daily, I don't mean that you look at it every day, but things that in the course of a month or 2 you might need. Maybe those credit card statements stay there in that file right near you for a while. Maybe you keep last year's tax return in there in case somebody needs to see it for whatever reason, or you need to figure out, excuse me, quickly what it was that your income was last year. And you don't want to have to call your accountant, you want to have it right there. Anything that you're going to use and look at with any frequency at all that you want to put your fingers on, at least even once every several months, keep it right next to you in that file cabinet. And you still don't need very many of those files. Anything that you need to keep, like tax returns, wills, other important documents, although I do think a copy of the will should be in your day-to-day because that's really vital in a way that somebody else might need. That's a just in case where somebody else might need to see it either quickly or absolutely know where it is. But those other things that you have that you need to keep, store them separately. Those are things that can stay in the closet or the storage room or whatever, because you don't need them very frequently, or you really need them just in case. So if worse comes to worse and you need the 5-year-old tax return, it's in a box that's also very clearly labeled from the year and the contents. And you know you'll be able to find it, but you don't have to look at it all the time. I'm going to end with 2 little tips that seem really silly, but I have found really help people. The stapler is your friend. For whatever reason, I find that people often don't staple things. They either turn down the corner of their credit card statement, or they just leave it, they file it, and they file the 2 or 3 page document just by itself, but you know, they don't put that document together in any way. Same for investment reports, same for lots of different things. Stapling it actually makes a big difference in being able to find things quickly and to look through things quickly. It's very easy if something is not stapled. Let's say you pull out, excuse me, you pull out 3 credit card statements because you want to look and see, did you get that credit that you were waiting for or whatever. If it's not stapled and you're rifling through them, you're going to take a lot longer and be really inefficient because they get messed up. You know, same with explanation of benefits. It's page 6 of 9. Well, is that this clump or is that that clump? When you get something that you're going to file, if it's got multiple pages, staple it. If you ever need to unstaple it, you can unstaple it. It's not a big deal. People also keep envelopes when they don't need to. It used to be that you might need proof that you mailed something, or you want to see when somebody postmarked it to you, or it just seems kind of like somehow not complete if you don't staple the stuff to the envelope it came in. Really, that's a just in case that you will never, ever need. So toss those envelopes unless there's something really unusual about it. Thank you. Again, my name is Terri Horwich, and I hope that it's been helpful for you. And if so, look for other recordings that I have done that will cover other subjects. Thanks very much.